The Secret Life of Roman Toilets, Business, Bacteria, and the Shared Sponge. Rome, 100 AD. The most advanced city on earth. 1 million people. Marble temples. Aqueducts carrying fresh water across mountains. And right now, 2 wealthy merchants are closing a deal worth the equivalent of millions of dollars. They are shaking hands. They are agreeing on terms. And they are doing all of this while sitting side by side on a long stone bench with holes carved into it, with no walls between them, in a room full of other people doing exactly the same thing. This was a Roman public toilet. And according to documented historical and archaeological records, it was one of the most important social spaces in the entire Roman world. What happened inside will genuinely surprise you. To walk into Rome in 100 AD is to walk into a city that should not exist by the logic of its era. 1 million people living in a single urban space, a population density that would not be matched anywhere in the Western world for well over 1,000 years. The streets are loud and layered with noise, the grinding of cartwheels on stone, the shouting of market vendors, the hammering of construction that never fully stops. The sounds of a city that is perpetually building itself larger. The architecture stops you immediately. The Forum gleams white. The Colosseum, completed just 20 years earlier under Emperor Titus, dominates the skyline. The aqueducts, 11 of them by this period, according to the records of Sextus Julius Frontinus, the Roman water commissioner who documented the entire system around 97 AD, deliver over 1 million cubic meters of fresh water into the city every single day. By any measure of physical infrastructure, this is the most sophisticated urban environment the ancient world has produced. And then you step off the main road. The side streets of Rome, according to archaeological evidence and the writings of Roman authors, including Juvenal and Martial, tell a different story about daily life. The smell hits first. Rome's waste management, for all the brilliance of its engineering, was uneven in its reach. The wealthy districts near the hills had access to private facilities and regular waste collection. The crowded apartment blocks, the insulae, some of them 6 or 7 stories tall, frequently did not. People made arrangements, not always good ones. But in the middle of all this, scattered across every neighborhood of the city, from the wealthy Palatine Hill to the crowded Subura district, stood the latrina, the public toilet. And the latrina was not what modern instincts would expect it to be. It was not a place people hurried through and tried to forget. It was, according to every piece of historical and archaeological evidence we have, a place people went to spend time. The physical structure of the Roman public latrina has been documented through extraordinary archaeological preservation. The best surviving examples come from Ostia Antica, the ancient port city of Rome, whose ruins are remarkably intact, and from Pompeii, where the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD preserved an entire city mid-moment, including its toilet facilities in volcanic ash. What these sites reveal is a room designed for occupancy, not urgency. A large rectangular space, lit by windows or open to the sky in courtyard configurations. Along the walls, and sometimes in rows through the middle of the room, ran continuous stone benches. Carved into these benches at regular intervals were openings shaped like a keyhole, a long oval slot at the front, narrowing to a circular hole at the back. No partitions, no walls between the seats, no division of any kind between the people sitting on them. Beneath these openings ran a continuous channel of flowing water, fed by the same aqueduct system that supplied the city's fountains and bathhouses. This drainage channel was connected to the Cloaca Maxima, the Great Sewer, one of the oldest pieces of engineering infrastructure in Rome, originally constructed in the 6th century BC and continuously maintained and expanded through the Republican and Imperial periods. Frontinus's records document its extraordinary capacity and the engineering oversight required to keep it functional across the entire city. At the feet of the seated occupants ran another, shallower channel, this one carrying clean water, or at least cleaner water. This forward channel served the practical purpose of providing water for the instrument we will discuss shortly. The whole system was, by the standards of its time, a genuine engineering achievement. Human waste flushed away continuously by moving water, channeled into a citywide drainage network, and carried out to the Tiber River. What it was not, by any modern standard of sanitation, was clean. But the Romans did not know what they did not know, and what they built within the limits of their knowledge was remarkable. Here is the thing that takes modern people the longest to fully absorb about the Roman latrina. It was a social space, not incidentally, not despite its primary function, intentionally, structurally, culturally. The Roman public toilet was designed as a place where people gathered, conversed, conducted business, built relationships, and spent significant portions of their day. According to Roman written sources, the satirical poems of Martial, the social observations of Juvenal, and various references scattered through Latin literature of the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, the latrina was where you ran into your neighbours, your business partners, your political allies, and occasionally your enemies. The absence of physical barriers between seats was not an oversight. It was the point. Privacy, in the Roman conception of daily life, was not something you expected in a shared urban space. The body's functions were natural. The idea that they required concealment from other people was simply not part of Roman social thinking. The conversations that happened in these spaces covered everything that mattered in Roman public life. Political discussions were common. Who was rising in influence? What the latest decree from the imperial palace meant for business? Which candidates for local office were worth supporting? Commercial negotiations took place. Deals were struck. Information exchanged. The latrina operated, functionally, as a kind of informal club that happened to have a specific physical purpose built into its furniture. Social class mixing, while not total, was significantly more fluid in the latrina than in many other Roman social spaces. A moderately prosperous merchant and a man of somewhat higher standing might share a bench in a way that would not occur in the formal social rituals of the dinner party or the law court. The shared circumstance was, in some sense, an equalizer. The toga, Rome's formal outer garment, turned out to be practically suited to this environment. Its draping provided a degree of coverage while seated that made the experience somewhat less visually explicit than it might otherwise have been, which presumably made extended business conversations marginally more comfortable for all involved. There was one object in the Roman latrina that, more than any other, captures the distance between ancient Roman sanitation practice and modern expectation. It is documented in Latin texts under two names, tessorium or xylospongium, and what it was, and how it was used, and by whom it was used, has generated more reactions of genuine disbelief from modern readers than almost any other detail of Roman daily life. The xylospongium was a sponge attached to a stick. That is the entire description. A natural sea sponge, the kind harvested from the Mediterranean, fixed to one end of a wooden or bone handle approximately the length of a forearm. Its function was singular and specific. It was the instrument used to clean oneself after using the toilet. It was inserted through the forward slot of the keyhole-shaped seat opening to reach beneath. It was shared. Among all the users of a given latrina on a given day, in a rotation that presumably followed some informal etiquette of passing and waiting. Between uses, it sat in the shallow forward water channel, or in a vessel of liquid. Roman sources mention vinegar and salt water as the standard soaking fluids. The Roman philosopher Seneca the Younger, writing in the 1st century AD, references the xylospongium in his letters with a specificity that confirms it was a completely unremarkable feature of daily life to his readers. He mentions it in passing, the way a modern writer might mention a paper towel dispenser, as a mundane object present in a mundane context. Modern microbiologists who have engaged with this aspect of Roman sanitation history have pointed out, with some understatement, that vinegar is a mild antimicrobial agent with meaningful but limited effectiveness against the range of pathogens that would accumulate on a shared implement of this kind. It would reduce bacterial load, it would not eliminate it. The gap between what Roman hygiene practice believed it was achieving and what it was microbiologically achieving was significant. But the Romans did not have germ theory. They had vinegar, and they used it. The Romans were proud of their sanitation infrastructure, and by the standards of the ancient world, that pride was not entirely misplaced. The cloaca maxima worked. The aqueducts delivered water. The public latrina was a genuine improvement over simply disposing of waste in the streets, which is what happened in cities that lacked equivalent systems. But modern archaeological science has revealed a painful irony buried in the remains of Roman sanitation. According to a landmark study published in 2016 by researchers at the University of Cambridge, led by archaeologist Piers Mitchell, the analysis of ancient fecal material, coprolites, recovered from Roman latrine sites across the empire, tells a story that would have horrified Roman hygiene advocates. The intestinal parasite load in Roman populations, as documented through this archaeological evidence, was not reduced by the elaborate sanitation infrastructure. In some respects, it was higher than in populations without equivalent systems. The shared water channels. The xylospongium passed between users. The fish sauce, garum, that Romans used as a condiment on almost everything, which was fermented in conditions that could harbour parasites. The transportation of food and goods across a vast interconnected empire that efficiently moved intestinal parasites along the same routes as trade goods. The latrina itself posed specific dangers that went beyond biology. According to Roman sources, the drainage system beneath the seats occasionally produced methane gas, the natural byproduct of organic decomposition in enclosed spaces. Explosions, while rare, are documented in ancient accounts. Roman writers also record encounters with creatures that had made their way up through the drainage channels. Rats, and in some documented cases, snakes. The act of sitting down in a Roman public toilet carried a non-zero risk of encountering a snake emerging from the opening beneath you. The Romans were aware of these dangers in a general sense. They prayed about them. The goddess Fortuna, fortune, luck, the divine management of uncertainty, was frequently invoked in connection with the latrina. Archaeological evidence from latrine sites includes votive offerings and small inscribed tablets asking for divine protection during what was, evidently, considered a genuinely hazardous activity. The experience of the latrina was not universal across Roman society. Like most things in Rome, it varied enormously depending on where you stood in the social and economic hierarchy. At the top of that hierarchy, the wealthiest Romans lived in private houses called domus, single-family residences of considerable size, built around central courtyards with their own water connections from the municipal aqueduct system. These houses had private toilet facilities, smaller rooms with stone seats connected to the drainage network, used only by the household and its servants. The social experience of the public latrina was, for these households, optional rather than necessary. Some wealthy Romans still chose to go. The networking value was real, but they were not compelled to. Their private facilities came with specific amenities documented in Roman domestic records. In cold weather, servants were tasked with warming the stone toilet seats before their master sat down. The Roman writer Martial makes reference to this practice with the same casual acceptance that characterized Roman attitudes toward the services provided by household slaves generally. The majority of Rome's population lived in neither luxury nor direct squalor. But in the insulae, the apartment buildings that housed most of the city's working population in increasingly vertical configurations, these buildings, some reaching 6 or more stories, rarely had toilet facilities connected to the drainage network above the ground floor. Residents of upper floors faced a practical problem that Roman law attempted to address, with limited success, according to legal records, by prohibiting the disposal of waste from windows onto the streets below. The solution for most insulae residents was a combination of chamber pots emptied at ground floor collection points and regular use of the public latrina. The collection points, large ceramic jars set into the pavement at street corners, were provided and maintained by the fullers, the textile cleaning businesses that had found a commercial use for the liquid waste they collected. Of all the aspects of Roman daily life connected to the public sanitation system, the economic use of urine is perhaps the most thoroughly documented, and the most counterintuitive to modern understanding. According to Roman historical and economic records, urine was a commercially valuable substance in the Roman economy. Its value came from its chemistry. Human urine, particularly aged urine, is rich in ammonia compounds produced by the breakdown of urea. Ammonia, as textile workers had discovered through long practical experience, is a highly effective cleaning agent. It breaks down organic soils, loosens dye compounds, and, critically for the Roman textile industry, can be used to clean and process wool with a thoroughness that water and plant-based soaps cannot match. The Roman textile cleaning industry, the fullones or fullers, built their entire production process around urine. According to the Roman scholar Pliny the Elder, who documented an extraordinary range of practical knowledge in his encyclopedic work Naturalis Historia, the fullers collected urine from public latrina sites and from large ceramic vessels placed on street corners specifically for public use as collection points. They transported this material to their workshops, where it was used in cleaning baths. The process of using this material to clean textiles involved workers standing in shallow vats of diluted urine-based solution and treading the fabric underfoot, a practice depicted in detail in the mosaic artwork found at Pompeii's fullery sites. The physical labour was significant. The smell was, by all accounts, extraordinary. The commercial importance of this industry was significant enough that the Emperor Vespasian, who ruled from 69 to 79 AD, imposed a tax on the collection of urine. When his son Titus objected to the undignified nature of a tax on such material, Vespasian responded with the phrase that has survived 2,000 years in both Latin and English translation: pecunia non olet. Money does not smell. It became one of the most famous observations in Roman political history, and it came from a conversation about urine collection economics. The physical evidence for everything described in this story is not theoretical. It exists. It has been excavated, catalogued, analysed, and in some cases subjected to DNA testing and chemical analysis that has allowed modern science to reach back through 2,000 years and read the biological record of Roman daily life with remarkable precision. The latrine complex at Ostia Antiqa, the harbour city that served as Rome's port, located approximately 30 kilometres from the city centre, is one of the best preserved examples of Roman public sanitation infrastructure anywhere in the empire. The stone benches survive intact. The drainage channels are visible. The architectural proportions of the space communicate immediately its social character. This was designed for occupancy, not for brief visits. At Pompeii, the preservation achieved by the Vesuvian eruption of 79 AD extends to the biological level. Coprolites, fossilized fecal material, recovered from Pompeii's drainage systems, have been analyzed using modern laboratory techniques. According to published archaeological research, this analysis has identified the intestinal parasites present in the Pompeian population, the dietary patterns visible in undigested plant and animal material, and the general health profile of people using these facilities in the final months before the eruption. Across the broader Roman Empire, from Housestead's fort on Hadrian's Wall in northern England to the legionary bases of Roman North Africa, latrine facilities of similar design have been excavated and documented. The consistency of the design across distances of thousands of kilometres reflects the standardisation of Roman military and civic engineering practice. The same keyhole seats, the same water channels, the same basic infrastructure installed wherever Rome established permanent presence. The xylospongium itself has been physically recovered in at least one documented archaeological context, allowing researchers to confirm that the implement described in literary sources was genuinely in use and not a literary invention. The sponge material had largely degraded, but the wooden handle component survived in conditions favourable to organic preservation. One of the most revealing questions the Roman latrina raises for modern observers is not about engineering or biology, it is about psychology. Specifically, how did Roman people feel about doing something that modern Western culture treats as intensely private, in a room full of other people, with no barriers and no expectation of solitude? The answer, based on everything the historical record tells us, appears to be completely fine. Not resigned, not embarrassed, actually comfortable. Because the entire cultural framework within which they understood the human body was different from the one that shapes modern Western sensibility. The shift toward the privacy model that modern Western cultures take for granted developed gradually over many centuries and reshaped by multiple intersecting forces. The spread of Christianity through the Roman Empire and its eventual dominance as the official religion of Rome under Constantine in the 4th century AD brought with it a theology of the body that emphasized shame, concealment, and the separation of physical functions from public social life. The body's natural processes were increasingly coded as fallen, embarrassing, and requiring management away from public view. This was not the Roman view. Roman philosophical traditions, Stoicism particularly, treated the body as a natural object, whose functions required neither glorification nor concealment. The communal latrina was consistent with a broader Roman social culture that included communal bathhouses, communal dining in certain contexts, and a generally less privatized relationship with the physical self. What the Roman latrina also created, in ways that the historical record hints at without fully documenting, was a specific kind of social bond. Sharing the most vulnerable physical moment of daily life with other people, and doing so regularly in a fixed space with the same community of neighbours and associates, creates a particular quality of familiarity. The Romans had a word for the bonds formed in shared experience. We do not have an equivalent word for the bonds formed in shared toilet facilities. But the experience was real and the social value was apparently genuine. The Roman sanitation system did not decline gradually. It collapsed. And the speed and completeness of that collapse following the political disintegration of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century AD tells us something important about the relationship between infrastructure and civilization. The aqueducts required continuous maintenance, engineers, administrators, funding, and the political will to sustain complex systems across generations. As Roman administrative capacity fragmented in the 4th and 5th centuries, maintenance faltered. Aqueducts fell into disrepair. The water supply to the public latrina network dropped. The drainage systems silted up without the water pressure to to keep them flowing, and the population of Rome itself collapsed. From a peak of roughly 1 million in the 2nd century AD to somewhere between 20 and 50,000 in the 6th century, leaving behind infrastructure scaled for a city that no longer existed. The technology itself did not disappear from human knowledge entirely. Roman engineering texts survived in monastery libraries. The physical remains of the infrastructure remained visible throughout medieval Europe. But the organizational and economic capacity to rebuild and operate systems of equivalent scale did not exist again in Western Europe for 1,000 years or more. The flush toilet, in the sense of a waste system using moving water and connected drainage infrastructure, did not return to widespread urban use until the 19th century. According to historians of public health and sanitation, this gap between the Roman achievement and its 19th century reinvention had measurable consequences for the health of European populations across the intervening millennium. The diseases that Roman sanitation partially controlled returned to endemic levels. The parasite loads that the shared xylospongium spread became the least of people's problems when waste management reverted to far more primitive arrangements. The Roman public toilet, with all its strangeness, with the shared sponge and the absent partitions and the business negotiations conducted in conditions that make modern sensibilities uncomfortable, was a genuine achievement. It was imperfect. It spread diseases it did not know about. It solved problems while creating new ones. But it was real engineering, applied to a real human need, at a scale that the ancient world had never achieved before and would not achieve again for many centuries. That is the standard by which history deserves to be read.